You know, for more than 100 years, there's been this one huge question that's driven the entire world of language education. It's caused massive debates, and honestly, it's a question you've probably asked yourself at some point.
Right? I mean, think about it. If you're going to learn, say, Spanish or Japanese, is there really one single magical recipe that guarantees you'll succeed? It sounds simple, but for decades, the best minds in language teaching were absolutely obsessed with finding that one single answer.
So that brings us to our first section, the quest for one method, a whole century of searching. And believe me, for pretty much all of the 20th century, people weren't just casually asking this question. Oh no, it was more like an all-out war to find the answer. This was the methods era, and everyone was looking for that one single silver bullet, the holy grail of teaching.
And we're not just talking about a friendly disagreement over techniques here. This was a full-blown clash of ideologies. You had experts building these massive, complex systems, and each one claimed to be it, the most effective, the most scientific, the only way to teach, all based on whatever the cutting-edge theories were in psychology and linguistics at the time.
Okay, so let's be clear about what we mean by a method. It's way more than just a lesson plan. Think of it like a complete top-to-bottom blueprint for a house. It dictates everything. What the teacher has to do, what the students have to do, exactly what content to cover, and all the step-by-step procedures. It's totally prescriptive.
And this whole quest for the one true method led to this really fascinating, kind of chaotic history. It was like this endless cycle, right? A new idea would pop up, challenge the old way of doing things, and eventually just completely take over, until the next one came along.
Just take a look at this timeline. It's just one method after another. Boom, boom, boom. You start with the old school grammar translation. Then people got fed up with that, so you get a reform movement that pushes for, actually speaking the language. That leads to the direct method. Then boom, the audiolingual method comes on the scene, inspired by behaviorism. And when that falls apart, the floodgates open and you get this explosion of innovative methods. See the pattern? Each new thing was basically a reaction against whatever came before it.
And here's where you can really see that conflict in action. On one hand, you had grammar translation, which basically treated language like a dead thing to be dissected. The goal wasn't to talk to people, it was to read old books by memorizing grammar rules. But then, whoosh, the pendulum swings all the way to the other side with the direct method. Its philosophy was totally different. Language is for talking, so the whole point should be to communicate in everyday situations.
Okay, this is really cool. What you're seeing here is one of the first big attempts to get away from just memorizing lists of words. This is from a guy named Francois Gouin, and he came up with this series method. The idea was genius, really. You'll link a series of sentences like, I walk to the door, I open the door, directly to the physical action. He was trying to ground language in actual lived experience, which is an idea that's, still a huge deal today.
All right, so fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, and this absolute giant enters the ring. The audiolingual method, or ALM for short. This one was all based on behaviorist psychology, and its big idea was super simple. Learning a language is just like forming a habit. So how do you do it? Drills, repetition, and more drills. You just mimic and repeat over and over until the correct sentences are basically burned into your brain.
And then Noam Chomsky came along and basically blew the whole thing up. This quote from 1966 was a bombshell. He said, wait a minute, language is not a habit. It's a creative system. Think about it. You and I are constantly saying things we've never heard anyone say before. That one single insight just completely pulled the rug out from under the entire audiolingual method. It was a game changer.
So what happened next? Well, with ALM gone, it was like the Wild West. The whole field just exploded with new ideas. The 70s were this wild experimental time. You had all these crazy-sounding methods popping up, like the Silent Way, Suggestopedia, Total Physical Response, a whole bunch of them. They all rushed in to fill the gap, and each one had its own, sometimes pretty weird, take on how we learn.
But all that creative chaos led to this really deep, profound realization. People started to think, maybe the problem isn't that we haven't found the right method yet. Maybe the problem is that we're searching for one method in the first place. And that, right there, was the start of a whole new paradigm.
And here it is, the post-method era. This wasn't just another flavor of the month. It was the end of the line for that century-long quest. It represented a massive shift in thinking, moving away from a single rigid answer and towards something way more flexible and, frankly, way more professional.
So what does this new paradigm actually mean? Well, first off, it completely rejects the idea that there's one superior method out there. Instead, the focus shifts to the teacher, to their professional judgment and autonomy. It's all about something called principled pragmatism, which is a fancy way of saying do what works for your students in your classroom. You're no longer following a rule book, you're using these methods as a resource.
Okay, but wait, this brings up a really big question, right? If we're now in a post-method world, does that mean everything that came before is just garbage? Have all those methods completely lost their significance?
I mean, really, should we just throw an entire century's worth of ideas in the trash? All those drills from ALM, those action series from Guguen, all the games and activities? Well, the answer from the post-method perspective is actually a very loud and clear no way. The whole trick is to change how you look at them. In the old days, a method was a prescription. It was a strict recipe, and the teacher was just a technician who had to follow it perfectly. But in this new era, methods are a resource. It's like a professional chef's pantry. The chef doesn't just follow one recipe for every meal. No! They use their expertise to pick and choose the best ingredients and techniques from that huge pantry to make something amazing for the people they're cooking for. The teacher is the chef, and the students are the diners.
So how do you actually do this? What does it look like in a real classroom? Well, it's basically a three-step process. First, you have to really analyze your situation. Who are these specific students in front of me? What do they need? What are our goals? Second, you have to figure out your own teaching philosophy, your core beliefs about what works. And then, and only then, do you go to that big resource pantry of methods and pick out the specific tools and techniques that fit your principals and your students.
And what all this does is completely reframe what it means to be a teacher. You're not just some robot delivering a prepackaged curriculum. In the post-method era, the teacher becomes a theorist, a true reflective practitioner.
I love this quote because it sums it all up perfectly. Teachers need to inquire into their practice. They need to reflect on what they do and why they do it, and need to be open to learning about the practices and research of others. That's it right there. It's an empowering call to action. It's saying that teachers need to be researchers in their own classrooms, always asking why, always reflecting, and always learning. So we're going to end by turning that big question right back to you. The hunt for the one single best method might finally be over, thank goodness. But the personal search for what's most effective for you and your students, well, that's more important now than ever before. So the real question isn't which method is best. The real question is what principles are going to guide your classroom.